just 2 months ago, we have actually got the honorary title of Forbes 30 Under 30. So you kind of know around my age. So the reason why we are here today, it's really not because of me, but because clients like yourself, you value your learners, right? And you're here because you truly believe that learning and development is so much more essential, especially during this crisis. People might take it for granted or like fight fires, kind of attend to the urgent things first, but then things that have long-term benefit and value, they kind of put it at the back burner. And a lot of you, we have long-term conversations in order to drive value. And today I'm going to talk about how we can continue to do so and some of the new solutions that you can potentially adopt. And just a disclaimer, whatever I'm sharing today, it's based on our insights of running, webinars and workshops and blended learning for the past 3 months since the circuit breaker started and when we are forced to move virtual, right? And at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide what is the right solution for yourself. If you hire us as a vendor, that's great. But if you want to go with somebody else, at least you have the general understanding of what to look out for in order to run a successful online program, even after COVID. So this COVID situation actually brought up a lot of good opportunity. They say, don't let a good crisis go to waste, right? So in the past, when we want to hire people who are very up there, we have to fly them over. So this is Michael. He's actually from Malaysia, and we have recently partnered with him in order to run some programs. So he has awesome programs about negotiation and sales. And I tell you, his accolades and credentials is very, very long, right? So over here, you have the group CEO of Air Asia speaking good words about him. And he has also, like us, helped his clients adapt online. And this is for a particular property development group in Malaysia. So many of you know that we run our flagship programs in-house, but we also partner with associate trainers like Michael in order to add value to our clients. So a lot of times we'll ask questions like, what are your challenges? And then basically 1,001 questions. And you'll hear a lot from Jana actually. And sometimes you might wonder why. Because regardless of who we are partnering with as a trainer, we want to make sure that it's not just a checkbox kind of thing, just like, this year we have to run XYZ topic, L&D, and that's it. Because that it's not outcome focused. So whoever we partner as a trainer, we will make sure that at the end of the day, your learners, not only are they engaged, but they can ultimately apply. So a lot of you came to us asking, how can we make a more engaging session online? And that is actually not the right question to ask. Rather, how can we leverage online and technology in order to get more outcome, even better than offline training programs. So this webinar is not about finding the right app to use, whether it's Zoom or WebEx. We've tried all of them. It's not about finding, the right engagement application or tools like Kahoot or Slido. We don't want to tackle the technicalities, but we really want to understand the core principles of what make workshop, be it whether it's online or offline, successful. So today, it's about leveraging technology in order to achieve more, and also some of the really underrated engagement techniques, right? So a lot of people, they are very fanciful about their engagement techniques. They have all these fanciful tools, but honestly, it's very stressful for the trainer in order to manage. And when you do engage your trainer, you want to also help them succeed in order for learners to actually feel fulfilled after the workshop, right? So helping trainers succeed is actually a very, very big part of the entire process with our client. And also, we want to make sure that even after phase 2, we can achieve better outcomes. All right. So if you're here today because you want to learn whether to Zoom or not to Zoom, or is it WebEx, or the right facilitation techniques like public speaking skills, then this is not for you. It's not too late if you were to log out. And also, if you're looking at more of a short-term thing to say, I just want for the 1 to 2 months during phase 2, what can we do? Then this might not be for you as well, because what we are going to cover here will be long-term outcomes and long-term benefit. So right now, I just want to get a gauge of whether we are on the right page or on the same page. Can you type in the chat, are you here for the right reason? If yes, say yes. If you're not here for the right reason, that's fine as well. You can type no. So please share whether you're here for the right reason. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, great, Simon. So on the same page. I guarantee you will take away so many insights today, and stay till the end, because at the end of the day, we will be giving this 5-page graphic summary, and you will learn how to unlock that at the very, very end. All right. So I'm going to cover a lot of tips, a lot of techniques and really get our minds stimulated. So to begin with, we know that soft skills training are becoming more and more essential, yeah? Especially during crisis, because, you know, we can't have face-to-face interaction physically, but communication is here to stay. So whether it's chat, whether it's video call or video call without face, how can we lead a team? How can we close sales? I know we have 1 or 2 sales managers over here. How can we persuade people virtually? And then how can we manage a team without any visibility of, you know, what they're doing, whether they're productive or not, or whether they're overworked, and how can we better support them, right? And also facilitating a proper conversation, a meeting online. Say last time, at least we can see people's body gesture. We can kind of, you know, put people on the same page. Over here, I think Alex is here with us today. So we have one trainer over here, Alex, who's fantastic at facilitation skills, right? So back then, offline, it's a lot easier because you have the logistics and can move around and then kind of make people come together and also touch on a hard matter. But now everything is virtual. Does it seem a little bit robotic? Hence, communication, it's not to say it's obsolete. And soft skill is not obsolete. It's just how we adapt. So the question to ask is really, what is essential right now? Because a lot of you know that we cover presentation as a soft skills for in-house training. But presentation in what? Like, why do we need it? Why is it important? How can it help your company achieve the ROI? So rather than just saying, oh, I need to help my teams present better, you need to be more specific. So some of the things and concepts I will cover later on, all right? And in order to really, really ensure that when you do run your trainings online, you have the appropriate measures in place in order to achieve the outcome. And there's also an increasing pressure to generate more outcomes. In fact, a lot of us, when you inquire about a particular program, right? Hang on. So a lot of us, when you inquire about a particular program, you realize that the questions you ask is just, I have a particular training that I need to run next month. Can you do it? And if you just go around and say, look for a topic, look for a vendor to train on a particular topic, then you're treating learning as like a cost and expense, which might not work for you and your organization. So when we talk about learning, it's not about the topics that we have to learn. It's about the competency that we have to help our learners develop. There's a difference between skill, competency, as well as knowledge, all right? So if we continue to see training programs from a very topic and categorical perspective, it's always gonna be a cost center. L&D will forever be a cost center and people will never appreciate it. So we need to shift the conversation from learning in order to help our learners apply. So when there is true application, then there will be value. All right. When there's true application, then there's value. Because at the end of the day, I tell you, people would forget what they learn. 90% of the time, they will forget what they learn. And do we actually measure whether they apply the learning to their work or not? How many of you actually measure whether they apply their learning to their work or not? Please type it in the chat. Yes or no? Do you measure what happens after the workshop? Yes or no? Or sometimes, yes or no? How about Sam? Okay, Darren said yes. Interesting. Okay, Simon said not yet. So for those of you who said yes, fantastic, right? And it is not just a matter of testing it based on survey questions. So, okay, maybe CS, do you mind unmuting yourself and share with us, how do you actually test the application after the workshop? How do you measure it?
So normally what we will do is that, of course, right after the training, we will be asking the participants whether would they be able to apply some of the things on their job. Then after that, 3 months down the road, we will also do a follow-up. But beside follow-up, we will also be observing whether do they apply some of the soft skills on the day-to-day. Because sometimes we also will have a joint calls with some of the guys when they meet the customer. So we will know, we will just ask them, why didn't you apply this kind of soft skill that you learned from some of the trainings? Right. So these are the things that we do, not just only on, sometimes it's very hard for you to measure it, but definitely from day-to-day work, you can always observe whether do they apply some of the skills.
Nice. Are you a head of department manager or L&D?
Yes, I'm a head of department manager.
Okay. So for you, it's a lot easier. Why do I say that? Because you work closely with the learners themselves, yes?
Yes.
So you can play a mentor role to keep them accountable. And HR and L&D managers over here, because I think 90% of you attending are HR and L&D managers. So if you can get someone like Chu Sun, in order to keep the learners accountable in their respective department, then the chances of them applying and succeeding is higher. But a lot of times when I see questions like, or answers like depends or not really, we have no visibility and no way to monitor their progress. And a lot of times people don't apply because they don't have the opportunities to do so. Not because they are bad, not because they are not self-directed, just because they don't have opportunity to apply it. So knowledge will forever just be knowledge in here, rather than kind of attributing to the organization outcome and goal, right? So this is the very first step, to see we're not just teaching people to learn, but we're teaching them to apply. And this would also help you determine what is the right course to use. And there are a lot of learning techniques as well that you can apply, which I will share later on. So over here, we want to shift from this to this. And at the end of the day is to drive value, right? And, you know, I saw this report. I'm not so sure how many of you have actually seen this recently. It's an infamous case study, right? Or rather like a statistics. So whether to say it's essential or not essential as a job, can you believe it? HR manager is considered the top 5. And I think people just don't appreciate the role enough, right? And I mean, it begs the question also, how do you define essential or not essential? Is it true, like whether people have to go to the office, is it a must or is it not a must? And I think at the end of the day, if there's a way in order for your organization to really kind of track whether people are satisfied with their learning opportunities and whether the things that they are put to learn are actually the things that can help them, then they would see it as essential, because HR, you govern the company's talent, right? So without HR, then there would be no good talent and there would be no company's growth. So I think people just don't see the importance enough. And I really, really hope that I can help you out here today. And to help you, it's also to shift from traditional approach of training program, which kind of shoebox learning into a very classroom context, right? So we have like out of work learning, which people, you know, do a lot. And then we have asynchronous learning where people learn on their own. And then we have synchronous learning where people come together, either a virtual classroom or physical classroom, to learn. And then we also have social learning, which actually is the most effective, learning through social. But today, actually, even before COVID, we were just doing classroom training, right? I think majority of people that we have asked and surveyed, they only do classroom training. And in fact, now you're also wondering, hey, soft skills training like public speaking, presentation, storytelling, can do virtually? Can we really, really do it virtually? The answer is yes. And we have to move from here in order to look at all other learning modalities. So there's like group coaching, there's lunch and learn, there's like virtual courses, and you don't just want to take on one approach. In fact, you want to kind of blend at least 2 or 3 in order to really make sure that the learning is effective, so that people don't get overwhelmed with information. They don't get overloaded with information, and they have space to digest 360 degree. And this is one very, very interesting study. In fact, some of our clients already know it. Online learning can be equally effective, if not more. So we have helped one of our clients, not here, but this was for their program. So if you can see, right, since last year, out of 5, this is the rating, and the highlighted one, the virtual run, it's actually a combination of live virtual coaching as well as self-paced modules. So we did like a blended learning approach. And this was scored more effective as compared to the offline version before COVID. And we requested for our client to actually put in one survey question at the very end, which I encourage all of you to do so as well. At the very, very end, ask them, even after COVID, which learning format would they prefer? And this is so, so shocking, right? Originally, our client came to us, you know, maybe it doesn't work, but willing to give it a try. But can you see the highlighted self-paced plus live group coaching? 10 out of 14 people actually prefer to continue this even after COVID. So we are trying to let data give us the answer, because a lot of times, because we haven't tried it, we might feel that it doesn't work, especially when soft skill, it's such a human thing. We need human interaction. But just think about it. People are glued to their smartphone, to their computers every single day. In fact, I'm guilty of that as well, right? You can binge watch video hours after hour. And it can be engaging if the trainer is engaging enough, and when there are right activities, right kind of design of curriculum in order to help learning become much more effective. And it's not just about learning, it's about application as well. Hence, effective, we also need to know, what are we measuring? What do we consider as effective or not? It cannot just be a satisfaction score. If it's just a satisfaction score, then it's very easy for learners to be satisfied. It's like, oh, have fun, that's it. But does it turn to ROI? Not so sure. So you want to work with clients, all of you, to get more ROI rather than just going through the motion. And I'm going to cover 3 main points today, and with very, very actionable takeaways and frameworks, which also will be reflected in the PDF summary. The very first one, regardless of whether it's online or offline, we have to implement measures for better outcome. What do I mean by that? We have to set learners up for success. So for some of you, say, oh, learners are not very proactive, etc. Maybe because all of the training programs that have been given to them doesn't serve a particular purpose. They don't see how it can help them with their work, help them achieve better outcomes. And maybe it is because we haven't addressed the particular hindrance of why they are not becoming more and more proficient in certain competency or skill. And then also the suitability, right? So if currently you're kind of putting people into a program because their boss says so, because it is mandatory as a theme for the organization to go through a particular topic, then I would ask you to pause here for a while and really reevaluate. Do we have to kind of put them into such batches? Because everyone is not made equal. And I think the possibility of online learning is so huge, because for once, with technology, we can cater to people's different learning needs without actually busting the budget. So a lot of you, I know when we have the conversation, right, you say that, oh, we have to fill the class. Hence, is it okay if we open up to other departments? We totally get it, because you have to account to finance, right? How, like, we don't charge per pax, but you also have to do the justification on your end. How much does it cost per pax? So of course, if you can get more people in the class, that would be more effective in a sense on an economic aspect. But you're harming learning outcomes in the process, and it's not your fault because of the processes. You ought to do this, right? So for once, with online learning, we can actually kind of tailor to people's different learning needs without actually putting them in the same classroom for synchronous learning, and then get them to learn even at their own pace, which I will share later what works for us. So let's go through this one by one. You can write as much notes as possible. These are the key questions that we usually ask, right? How does this training fit into your overall L&D goal? Or more importantly, organization goal. So you see in the graphic over here, we have different competency. And the competency shouldn't be seen as silo. When you say public speaking or sales, or even like project management, they can't be seen as silo. If you have a way to combine and string the dots together of how one training can actually be a stepping stone for another training to ultimately the goal, then your training will be much more effective. And also, the problem you're trying to solve and the challenges you're trying to overcome. So we usually ask this, hey, why do you need this training? And if the answer is, yeah, of course it's a good skill to have, then it's not specific enough, all right? So that there must be a pain for you to solve. So for example, right now, the pain is that, for example, salespeople, right? The pain is that you can no longer meet clients face-to-face virtually in order to convince them and build that trust. So the challenge is, how can you connect with people emotionally, virtually? And that is contextual. So it's not just sales. Then you will have a very generic, program about, sometimes people talk about NLP or, different persona and DISC, so many tools out there, but those are means to an end. We want to keep the end in mind. And without it, this is the most important bit. Without this training, will there be severe consequences? Because sometimes if you come to us and even without it, there's no severe consequences, then I would say, maybe you should invest in other topics or other competency, right? So you have to be very, very strategic with your resource allocation. And what is the transformation that you're looking? Is there a way, for example, like HOD, like CS, in order to measure the outcome so that you can go back to that number, the very, very tangible number, to say, this training did in fact help achieve that. And when it comes to L&D growth, then not only can you convince the upper management to budget more resource allocation for you to try out new things that work, but also you can convince people on the ground to inspire them to say, hey, your colleague went for this training and look, she is at a better place right now, or he is at a better place right now, and so actually achieve more with his work. And when there is this collective inspiration and more proof and testimonial of how training actually helped them, then they will be so inspired to learn. No longer do you have to force them to say, hey, can you attend this training? Or, maybe don't go for this meeting. You don't have to nag at them anymore or kind of force them to believe that what you're doing for them is right. So collective inspiration is extremely important. And you see this in Google as well. They have a culture for learning. So online learning as well, a lot of you talk about challenges, right? How do you get people to adopt online learning? You give them the tools, but because they don't have challenges, they don't need it. So it's just like, why should I take this medicine? So first we have to look at the gap before prescribing the solution. Solutions usually seems quite fanciful and cool, but without a problem, people won't buy into the solution. So the second thing is outcome, right? We have to be very specific. So rather than just saying good at public speaking, can we quantify it so that even for your head of director, if you're going to buddy up with them to say, hey, can you keep these learners accountable? They know what signposts to look out for. How do you measure what's better, like better or not? It's very subjective, right? But if you say a person can speak more concisely, so rather than saying 5 sentences, 1 sentence, what? On point. Very good. That's a very tangible yardstick, right? Or a person from having a lot of filler words to lesser filler words, that is also something that is very visible. And when learners themselves can know for sure the outcome that is expected from them, be it whether it's conducted offline or online, then they can be more confident to say, hey, I have transformed. And this is working out for me. Thank you, HR. Thank you, L&D, right? So be extremely specific with the outcome. It has to be measurable. Then contextualizing the learning as well, especially now soft skills, right, online. So we have programs like turning crisis into conversation. So contextual rather than just public speaking, or engagement techniques to pitch anything virtually, right? Or sales to motivate sales teams. So it depends on what the challenge is. You can contextualize and make it measurable. And some of you have probably seen this thing called the Bloom's taxonomy. And for all trainers, it's kind of like you can call it like a Bible in order to make sure that learning is effective, right? To ensure that, hey, people don't come in just to understand and gain awareness about a particular new concept of how to design slides or how to speak better or how to sell better. It's not about understanding because there are books and I think probably a lot of them already know. But the real thing, it's really to, in the pyramid, it's really to hit the top part, which is creating value. And so rather than saying previously, understand there are different story structures, right? It's to apply and create compelling narrative using proven structure. So the last part, it's about the hindrance. We have to know what's in their way. And why are people not so motivated? Why are they not applying? Is it because of a mindset thing? That they generally think this is a complete waste of time, and because maybe they're in their 50s already, they don't really have that drive in order to improve themselves anymore. They're quite stable already. Some learners are like that. And some young learners, they are very, very hungry for certain knowledge, innovation, design thinking. They are, every training they sign up, right? Especially government agencies. I have some friends, they actually sign up for so many trainings that I get a bit envious, just, this is good. Help me improve my career, have more badges on their resume, right? And at different life stage, they will have very different mindset. And also how it affects their work. And sometimes it's not that they don't have the knowledge. Sometimes it's the opportunity. And sometimes it's not that they don't have the skills, but because generally their bosses are not very supportive of the new skills they develop. I've received so many complaints from participants that say, hey, Kai-Sing, I love what you teach. I think my boss should sit in the workshop because I know for sure whatever I'm going to apply from today, my boss is not on the same page. So sometimes it's not about getting the learners from the ground in order to apply, but it's getting the entire department to understand the importance and follow the same best practice. So everyone would be able to improve, right? It's not like, it doesn't take one hand to clap. It takes 2 hands to clap. In fact, now multiple hands in order for your learning program to work, be it virtually or offline. And sometimes people just generally don't have the time. Like, you put them in a one-day workshop already, they're like, I have so much meeting, my boss is still emailing me, my clients are looking for me, they are distracted. And the good thing about online learning is we can actually put it bite-sized so that we address the time issue. And also ultimately support, right? Do we have the right support system after the workshop, which is the most important thing, after the workshop, in order to ensure learning continues and application continues. Okay, then finally, it's whether it's the right fit. So talking about online learning, some people are not very tech savvy. So we don't want a case where people come into a Zoom session or WebEx session trying to figure out how to do this and how to do that, because it stands in a way of learning the actual content and applying. They get frustrated with the technology itself. So if such a situation, you might need to tailor your registration process. Maybe filter out people who are not so tech savvy, and perhaps even run an onboarding course. How to, like, depending on your organization, what you use for your virtual conversation, right? How to use WebEx, how to use Zoom, how to use a Microsoft meeting, or how do you go on this online portal. You have to teach them first in order to grasp the technology before they learn the actual thing. Otherwise, it will be so hard for the trainer as well to actually facilitate an engaging class because they're distracted with 1,001 things, right? Then their proficiency level as well. Some people, they're actually more advanced than the rest. And it's like, oh, you know, why am I here? Maybe out of like 10 learning objectives, only one matters to me. Then maybe they're not the right person in the course, even though their bosses might kind of, you know, put them and nominated them for the training itself. So we really have to ensure that people are of the right proficiency level, ideally in the same team, so that they can find it that's useful. And usefulness depends on purpose. They have to be able to see the outcome. And tech readiness as well. Some people, they, like say for example, bandwidth is an issue, right? So if you force them to actually switch on their camera, it's not that they don't want to, but it's just generally their internet will lag and it's very difficult, or for security reason, or maybe they don't have the right infrastructure to do so. And some of you, say in a government agency, maybe you can't log on to internet, right? So in terms of infrastructure as well, like do they have their personal laptop with the right tools, etc. These are all the different nuances we have to kind of clear before we go on the actual learning process and the learning journey. So you want to take away all the tech thing and make sure that people are entering the right class for the right reason, with the right purpose, with the right outcome, before we embark on the journey. The first step is the most crucial step in order to ensure your learning is successful, or your online program is successful. Then during the session, we can then set the right conditions in order to turn learning into outcome. So if you look at offline intervention and online intervention, right? Actually, if you put them side by side, you might see that not many activities need to change. There are 4 limitations over here. Time, whether people, you know, like sitting for 8 hours straight, will they actually take it? Space, you know, you can't go group by group to kind of monitor them. And then interaction as well. You can't physically interact with them to help them out for certain things. And then there's logistics. So give you an example. If the skill is to speak more concisely, right? Then if the offline activity, it's more of the individual activity. Oh, how do you pitch on the fly? And then we do some role play to get people to summarize ideas with a mental framework or structure. Then we want to look at time, space, interaction, and logistics. What is in the way? Then we realize, hey, actually, this one can be done virtually as well, because speaking what? So when we are on Zoom, for example, we would know whether people speak concisely just by listening to them. So in fact, when we shift this online, we don't have to change anything, right? But there are situations like this where you want people to be more competent in terms of creating compelling structures. So offline setting, you have group activities where people use post-it notes. Wow, it's very interactive. And then logistics becomes, interaction and logistics becomes a limitation when we want to shift this online, right? You can't do this over a video call. And some of you might not be able to access like Google Slides or some of the collaboration tools because of security reason. Then can we be a little bit more creative? So maybe storyboarding, give them a PPT template and have a framework. So individual exercise. And in order to replicate that cross-pollination of ideas in group discussion, why don't we do peer-to-peer evaluation post the workshop? So there are things we can do in the workshop itself. There are things we can do post the workshop, and then post follow-up, right? So it's about knowing the end goal in mind and then be creative by understanding what gets in the way. And over here, this is an example. So a template, a storyboard, and this is how people apply it, right? So they have their own, writing, and it kind of still mimics the post-it notes. And over here, you can see case study exercises as well. So things can still be done. So it's about thinking outside the box. And then we have the before, during, then after. it's about helping them transfer their skills to their job, right? So I've asked this question. Some of you said depends, and some of you said yes, which is very, very good. So we should do more of this. And in fact, Rome is not built in a day. So we have to set the right conditions in order for people to master certain skills. And mastery takes a long time, and it's about creating habit, right? So one way to do it, like what CS has mentioned, is to have a follow-up application, or rather a follow-up maybe 1 month after the workshop. So for this, we have launched this initiative starting from end of last year. So if you have not heard from Jana about the post 1 month follow-up, please let her know so that we can offer more value. So in a survey, we will understand what is in the way, you know, how, and a lot of times they say that, oh, I have no time, or I don't have enough opportunity. So it's about bosses creating opportunities for them to actually apply the skills. Or maybe just generally, they don't have the habit. One of our learners actually asked us, oh, do you have any recommendation of how I can build better habits to sharpen my storytelling skills? And it's through all this feedback that we know what actually can we do in order to help learners improve. And this brings us to the offering of coaching packages, which some of you have already applied and benefited from. Say, for example, every high-stake presentation, then you would invite Kaising or other coaches in order to come and evaluate whether the framework has been applied correctly. Is the story narrative persuasive enough to win that deal, right? And then so people say that learning happens and learning is more effective when people actually need it. So in a case scenario like this, it is essential for them to apply it. So it becomes something that they internalize. And then finally, it's about creating more opportunities, right? So about the habit feedback, we actually created a 30-day email course. This is completely free. So we haven't launched it yet. Only a few of you have access to it. So after every workshop, then learners can actually opt in and receive bite-sized emails in their inbox, right? So these are just some examples. Then there are some exercises as well that they can do over a 30-day period. And this includes also online reading, challenge of the day, and short exercises. So just now we talk about different learning modalities beyond the classroom itself, right? We're actually getting people to refer to available resources and then draw learnings, connect the dots so that from a neurological perspective, the neural pathway gets strengthened. And that's how people learn best. When we talk about learning and development program, we also have to know what is the most effective way in order to learn. So there's like a learning hacks as well. So like giving pre-quizzes, etc. And we embed this in our course, and you should too for all of your other courses, be it soft skills or hard skills, right? So this is just like the implementing the measure part, yeah? And there's already so many things that we can start thinking about to do things differently rather than just going through the motion of checking the boxes of saying, okay, this training is important, that training should go next, etc. So right now, in the chat, I would like you to type in what is one thing from the first segment that I've covered so far that you can immediately apply. What is one thing you would start applying more of in order to ensure learning outcomes are achieved? So you may type in the chat, what is one thing you can apply in order to ensure learning outcomes are achieved? And perhaps I would also like to invite some of you. So let's see, Eunice, are you here with us? You can unmute yourself and maybe verbally share as well.
Yeah, probably a follow-up on the application-wise, because currently what we are doing is a lot on the training, but less on the follow-up.
Right.
So that's useful for us.
Right. Which do you think is the easiest to implement? So there is like the post 1 month follow-up survey, then there's like the bite-sized learning via email, and then there's like the end-to-end coaching.
Probably the 1 month survey, because it's easier to track as compared to the email, and the email, the survey is easier to create as well. So if it's something immediate, it will be survey. Right,
got it. Thanks, Eunice. Talking about surveyors, there is actually an art in creating survey questions as well. So a lot of, even like post-workshop feedback form, right? The questions are not targeted enough in order to actually help L&D or even the trainer to know how to improve in order to enhance learning. enhance better learning. So bad questions are like, oh, how satisfied are you with the training? Instead, we should ask questions like, beyond how can the training be improved, it's really about more outcome focused, right? So satisfied or not satisfied, why does it matter? So it's more of, okay, what are top 3 key takeaways that you can immediately apply? Or out of all this particular topic, which one is the easiest for you to apply immediately? Or which one do you need additional support from L&D or HR or the trainer? So we know the actionable changes and steps we can take through the survey insights, rather than just a very courtesy kind of thing. Because I've seen a lot of survey questions not very useful. So I think just 5 very, very powerful questions can get you a lot of insights for you to do great work in the future. So thanks, Eunice. And how about Elgin? Yes,
for me,
Elgin?
it's also the 1-month survey, because it's, if you talk about immediate action, that would be probably the easiest one to follow up with. But I also think the part on finding the right fit, if we can go deeper, then it takes a bit of thought, but I guess that would be one of the useful stuff.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Elgin. In fact, finding the right fit, there's a whole profiling, assessment. Not for today, but there's another topic altogether, right? That we can go on and on about it with certain techniques and skills, and also different infrastructure to set in place. And yeah, Chusun has this. He embodies the quality of a good boss. Leaders should lead by example by participating in more learning. In fact, that is very, very true. So some of the best workshops that we've had, the entire department, including the leader, attended it. And the leader is the one that opens the session and say, this is the reason why we are having this training in the first place. And this is meant to help you, etc., etc. And then at the end of the day, also creating an accountability system, right? So when a leader goes through the learning, then it shows a lot. And then you start receiving complaints from participants like, hey, maybe my boss should sit in this course, or I will never work one. I tried before, give up already. My boss just put more words on the slide. And maybe they have the right intention, but they speak a different lingo. So good to know that all of you are reflecting. So moving on, now measuring outcomes. This is like the very first step, right? And then going on to the more specific online part. So more specific online part would be this, identifying the best learning modalities. Please do not cut and paste. So a lot of, it's very tempting to say, 8 hours offline training, right? Can we just do it but on Zoom and then make it engaging? No. Okay, people learn differently online, so you cannot cut and paste. And how do we choose? We have 5 different things we have to consider. Number 1, it's live interaction and engagement, because with engagement, then learning is better. Whether you can actually mimic the personalized feedback that you have offline. Can we measure outcome through certain activities? Is it easy to schedule? One day, usually quite easy to schedule, right? But then if you're going to change format, might be a different story. And then infrastructure. So some of you mentioned that you want to go online, but you don't have the right tools and application in order to do so. So I'm going to introduce to you some of the tools and some of the learning modalities that works. It's nothing, very out of the world. It's really about going back to the fundamentals and driven by outcome and have the goal in mind. So there are 2 main learning modalities, and one is bite-sized live lesson. That means if you have a normal 1-day course, you want to split it at least into 4 hours or maximum 4 hours per session. I have sat through 3-hour masterclass. It's not too bad because I'm self-directed. I sign up for the program myself. But then if your learners might not be self-directed, they're nominated, I tell you, it would really be hell for them. So 4 hours with a tea break in the middle, about 15 minutes is just right. And then we have self-paced course. So it's kind of like online videos, right? But you cannot just say, hey, go and watch these bite-sized videos. You must make sure that you can measure outcomes through assignments. And ideally, someone is evaluating the assignments and getting people to resubmit and repolish, etc. So again, it's outcome. And then the best of both worlds is actually blended learning. So this is a mix of self-paced as well as live coaching. So ideally, the coaching session that comes after the self-paced is close to the completion of the course itself. So we want to make sure that we have that recency effect, then people don't forget what they've learned. So I'm going to deep dive into one of each and how you can apply at your workplace. Okay, so regardless of what learning format, it's very important to ensure the successful completion as well as immediate application. What I mean by successful completion, so sometimes people, they would ghost out on the trainer, right? Or like HR, even though you're in, but because they don't have their cameras on, you don't know whether they're actually paying attention or they're completing their exercise or not. And then if it's going to be an online format where they just watch video tutorials, do they actually complete it, right? So you want to make sure that they're encouraged to complete it. And then also there's immediate application. So ideally, if it's done online, there should be quizzes. Quizzes is just like the tip of the iceberg. There should be well-developed and designed assessment as well, where you can really see the tangible outcome, which is why the first step I mentioned earlier on, it's very important. Because if you just say, hey, better's public speaking, but then if they submit a video of themselves, then how do you evaluate and measure whether they are better or not? But if you say speak concisely, then especially how to grade them. Grade with an inverted comma, yeah? Then deep internalization. So you also have to factor in whether the duration of the course, be it whether it's done live or self-paced, they have the ability to internalize. Some people, they are faster as a learner and some people are slower. And for slower learners, right, if the pace is too fast, and if now everyone has to be forced into this Zoom meeting or WebEx meeting, then maybe they are already not so tech savvy or they're trying to figure out, then they are also slow. It will be very, very stressful for them. And at the end of the day, they will feel like, wow, it's good, but I wish I had more time. You sometimes always see conflicting comments in survey after the workshop. Some say actually can be shortened, and some say, oh, it can be like 3 days. Then you don't, like, why? Because they're not on the same page, right? So allow some headspace for them to internalize, and also ensure that there is visible transformation that can be seen. Ideally tangible. So in assessment, we talk about authenticity, right? Usually if you're gonna conduct your training live, it's very difficult for us to know whether they have transformed, besides asking like closed-ended and open-ended question. So we have to get them to submit assignments. So if everyone can submit their assignment as a trainer, he or she can better evaluate if the concepts are being applied properly. And it gives little excuse for people to kind of just ghost out from the live meeting, right? Because they know that they have to submit something, and in order to do that work, they have to sit through the entire course, all right? So this is what we have tried and done. So over COVID, it's actually very, very interesting. We've tried this blended learning approach, and in fact, it's the best. Schedule-wise might be a challenge, but over here, what we discovered is that learners not only can manage their own time because the self-paced is so bite-sized, right? So maybe we give them 1 week to complete the self-paced module, depending on how many modules there are. And then 1 week after, we do a live coaching, or we can have like in between, which I'll touch on later. So because some of them, some people after COVID, they're more free. Some people are less free, depending on whether they're parents or not. So can you imagine having their kids running around? No, it's not so bad. Some of them are already back to preschool, but then they also have to manage calls. They have to like maybe cook for their family members, right? Or manage their parents, etc., aging parents, and take care of all these things. So on top of work, they have their family duties, and not everyone has the same experience. So you want to give them a choice to actually juggle and manage their time. Hence, bite-sized learning is good. And when we have individual assessment rather than group assessment, in fact, I noticed that the quality of the output is better. Because, in a workshop, some people are more extroverted and their voices are heard because they have louder voices. And some people are more introverted. So in a group, right, especially if it's just a short 1 day and they might not necessarily know one another, teamwork takes time in order to form. And over here in a group, sometimes people would just say, this person seems to take the lead, right? So I would just take a back seat. And then they don't benefit as much in the learning because they are letting the leader of the team to apply and lead the conversation. So they're only there as a bystander and observing and internalizing with here, but not with action. But when we go online and say everyone has to submit their work, they are then given space to internalize and digest. And we have got some of the, actually comparing offline and online, the submission is actually a lot better, simply because I think they have more time and headspace, personal headspace to then put in effort in the assignment. They have no excuse, can't be a freeloader, right? And on top of that, also, we can evaluate to really see the gaps. It becomes, like, as a trainer, so easy to see a gap as compared to group. So individual work, you can see discrepancies, some are much better. Then you want to help the ones lagging behind. And you can do so by doing like a record video. So now online, so interesting, right? You can actually record the tutorial. They can re-reference it if they can't follow. And then you can, even as a trainer, record your feedback. There are certain tools which I'll type it in the chat later on. And just giving people a choice to reference back what they have learned, it's very helpful that you can't do in an offline context. And during group discussion as well, done live on Zoom, you can capture everyone else's evaluation. And in order to simulate the online learning or the group discussion, you can do peer evaluation. So there are really many different ways we can achieve the same end goal. It's just about really rethinking what is the outcome you want to achieve. So now that we have more self-paced modules, right? In fact, we have more time to focus on delivering value in person, either virtually or in future, even after COVID, offline. What do I mean by that? A lot of times, if it's just a one-day workshop, because time is so tight, right? You can't, afford people to go away for 2 days. It's very difficult for people to actually, it's very difficult for a trainer to talk about something that is more personalized. So during personalized feedback, those are usually given through activities. But you realize a lot of the, say, offline workshop training materials are actually repeated. So while we customize our program, 70 to 80% of the materials are actually repeated. If we can pre-record that repeated one and the customized one, we kind of put it in a live conversation, then we have more time in order to give people the customized value. And for your training vendor, be it whether it's us or other companies, right, it gives them more incentive as well in order to charge at a rate that it's affordable, because they only have to do one time of recording, right? So for us, if you say, hey, can we reduce the price for the workshop? I mean, not to say we'll give discount for everything, but we can reevaluate to see, hey, recorded once, maybe we can charge at a lower rate. And then we can reprice our program and focus more on the live interaction, because that's where we exchange time with money. So from a business standpoint, it works for the trainer in order to give more content without compromising the outcome, and to give more value without increasing their time and without increasing their input. So it's a win-win situation for both. And for your learners, it becomes a situation where they can learn at their own pace and learn on demand. And that is what makes learning effective. So over here, there are two ways of blended learning, right? So one is, okay, you finish this entire course, then you go for group coaching. So in a group coaching, it's about how you have effectively applied the learnings into a particular case study or specific areas in your work. How can you transfer that learning to your work? We can have those conversations, which we usually can't in an offline workshop because there's so many people to handle, right? So this is one format, very modular. And then another format, which I love, but scheduling wise might be a little bit challenging. So it depends on organization to organization. This one, we have a kickoff meeting to kind of set the premise so that people, before they go into self-paced learning, they have kind of a concept of why they're even going through this in the first place. The HR can be there to kick off the session. Trainer can be there in order to inspire them of what this is about, and then even onboard them to the online portal, right? So we use Thinkific, we use Zoom, but you might use other platform, doesn't matter. Platform is just a means to an end. It's not the main focus. The main focus over here is the flow, right? So we have Zoom, Thinkific, then we have a check-in. So for example, storytelling. We can't leave it all the way to the end for us to evaluate them, because maybe halfway through, they already are struggling, and then all the way to the end, it might be too late already. So we have a check-in session, right? We check in to say, oh, storyboarding, are they applying correctly? Then we can correct them first before they move on to actually designing their slides, etc. So when it comes to the final product, it's not too late. And it would be the ideal quality. And then we do like a group wrap up and, exchange ideas, tackle very personalized problem. So these are just some examples of the video that I talked about. So in between when they submit their assignments, ideally the trainer is there to evaluate their work. So you can see some of this, right? Like the Benjamin's one, it's very, very brief. So maybe no time, just like write a few words. Then of course, no pass, right? Then you have to say, hey, can you, don't jump into the conclusion that they're not putting in effort. Just ask, okay, what are you struggling with? You know, can I help? And then also give some actionable suggestions and get them to resubmit their work. And then for those that have really, really good work, usually what we do is, since we have the online portal, the infrastructure already, right? We can upload it live and say, hey, everyone, take a look at Keith's work. Keith is very good. You should learn from him because this, and that. Then that's where we simulate the classroom learning, but asynchronously. So there's so many different ways in order to achieve the same outcome. And it really doesn't matter the platform. So this one I've like re-emphasized over and over again, right? It's really the end goal, means to an end. In fact, learning right now, I think we are still looking at it from a very traditional way, because we are not looking at the end outcome, but we are looking more in terms of the activity. Is it 1 day or is it 2 days? We are looking more in terms of the unit or how many packs should go in, rather than what is it that we are trying to achieve as a goal. Hence, the first step is always make sure we have the measurable goals at the front, right? People go in before we talk about all this learning intervention. And very, very, very lastly, over here, it's about understanding the skills required to facilitate and apply. So all of you are HR, L&D, you don't need the facilitation skills because the trainer will do the job, right? But there are some yardsticks that you can use in order to evaluate whether the trainer is ready in order to conduct it online, and even help the trainer to succeed. Because sometimes it's really quite difficult for the trainer if the context at the very start, it's not set right. So over here, a lot of you are kind of, you know, a little bit hesitant, just like, you know, soft skill, can it really be engaging? Online learning can be engaging. And these are just some testimonials that we have collected, right? Just as like a proof to say that actually it's not just we feel that it's okay and good, but the learners themselves don't feel like, oh, it's 4 hours long. They don't feel that, you know, it actually hinders communication at all. But of course, we also do have kinesthetic learners who prefer face-to-face. So if at the very start, you give them an option, if you are running several programs, you can ask them whether they prefer offline or online, and then just set out the benefits and the disadvantages of both and let them choose. So when they are in the class, they are already framed with the right mindset to achieve success, rather than you know, poking holes and looking at things that are not so good. So yeah, session can be fun and also applicable, right? So I'm not too sure whether is Charlene here. She signed up for this webinar. Yeah, so Charlene actually sat through our virtual program, 4 hours for 2 sessions. And this was what she said, HR manager, right? So she's also taking like an MBA program with other students. So we've run many different topics, from the quite technical ones like data storytelling, visualization, all the way to things that you would usually think can only be done offline, like storytelling. And there are trainers that we partner with as well that are already helping their clients to adapt, and even before COVID, already succeeded in having webinars. So like Michael, he has been giving webinars for different countries and very, very established companies as well. And then also very, very practical, right? So we have Alex in the room with us, also already tried out blended learning. So if you're struggling with the infrastructure, know that you can look out for trainers who already have those infrastructure. It can be us, it can be somebody else. You don't have to waste your time and effort to create the infrastructure yourself. Leverage what is already existing out there. And over here, beyond just beyond what I've covered earlier on, it's also to help trainers engage virtually. So, you know, there are a lot of tools out there like Slido, Kahoot, etc. Like just now I mentioned, actually it creates a lot of stress, and sometimes people have to go on their phone and then scan this and scan that. Might be a little bit difficult. In fact, at the very start of COVID, I've tried out so many tools, love some of them, but when I tried and pilot tested with some learners that are not commissioned, and also some of my friends, I realized some of the disadvantages and advantage, and I realized, why don't just kick to the basics? Because basics work, right? So of course, we want people to turn on their camera, but especially I think girls, usually it's like, oh, you never tell me in advance, so you know I have to make myself look good, right? So very, very difficult if you turn suddenly, hey, turn on camera. So it would be good to actually give them a heads up to say camera it's needed, and don't police them. Because I've tried once at the very beginning of this whole COVID thing, right? Because how do we get people to engage and switch on their camera? And when you make it like a compulsory thing, and it sounds like it's being forced on them, it will leave a very bad taste. And while all the other 90% of participants say that, oh, it's very engaging, there are some handful of people who really don't like to be forced, then they would actually show their dissatisfaction. So over time, we also learn, right? And so far, the most effective way is to tell people the whole reason why we need cameras to be switched on in the first place and give them a choice. Because ultimately, we want to give them a purpose so that they can direct themselves to learning. So the purpose would be this. Turning the camera on, it's not for us, it's really for you guys, like I've mentioned earlier on, because without seeing your faces, I don't know whether you're yawning because Kaising is so boring, or whether you're nodding and just like, okay, I'm doing things right and I should continue, or whether I should give a break, whether I should ask questions right now. Everything is very arbitrary, and if I don't know, your learning experience would not be good. Because if I can't see your face, I'll just, maybe if I'm boring, I'll just go on and on and on and on, and you will sit 8 hours straight and just like, why am I here? And nobody gains from this, right? So if you bring the purpose across, then it's up to them whether they want to respond to it or not. And then sometimes also you get people like, oh, everyone else, like 70% of people switch off their camera and seems fine, then maybe I should switch it off too. It depends from trainer to trainer and also the soft skills. If it's public speaking, I think you have to make it compulsory and get people, during the registration form, right? You have to get them to check terms and conditions. If you attend this training, these are things you have to meet, like requirements. Have you read the terms and conditions? Yes. So when they come, they have this set of expectation and they are already mentally prepared. But in a webinar like this, then we can use other tool features such as the chat to know whether they are alive and kicking, to know whether they're present. And then sometimes also say that for people with no cameras on, right, occasionally call upon them to speak and discuss virtually, because sometimes they are genuinely learning. And maybe because background, the kids running around and it's not so, not so nice looking, like my computer, it's actually the old model. I don't have the cool virtual background thing to back me up. So I have to, always, switch angle in my room, and there's people walking around. It's very difficult. So, but they might be learning. So don't accuse them for not being present. Just like, okay, I hope all of you are present here, right? So if you can get them to switch on the microphone and also give them a heads up, then it would be really good. But at the very start, you have to help your learners succeed. And how can you do so? Ideally, you kick off the session. So you introduce the training and you give the context of why L&D and HR or HOD, it's even bothering about this competency, how it affects them, what kind of challenges can it help to resolve, etc. So they feel like, yeah, I can benefit from this. And naturally, if you feel that you can benefit from this, you would engage and you would want to listen. Because if you don't listen, then it's your loss. And the trainer can't do much about it as well. So kicking off the training by setting the context, like Simon Sinek, some of you might subscribe to his work, right? Start with why. So starting with why first, then also talk about, oh, this particular trainer. Introduce the trainer to say, if you have done your due diligence, 1001 training agency out there, right? Or even your in-house trainers. What is their experience and why have you got them to train rather than any other people? So you give them the confidence that, hey, HR actually did a lot of work in order to ensure that we achieve the outcome. So don't put it to waste. And I always tell learners, you guys are very lucky. I hope people would sponsor my education and learning. Now I have to do it myself, right? But they are very, very lucky. And sometimes they're actually heavily invested in when it comes to knowledge. It's just a pity when it's not put into good use. So it's about getting to the basics and not being too fanciful and just making sure that there are different ways in order to ensure people are there listening to you and the outcome is the most important. So under the chat function, ideally, you would allow people to upload information. So for example, like in our courses, right, we have a lot of bite-sized exercises. So one building up to another. And at the end, there will be a final assessment that everyone would have to submit their work and then go into breakout rooms and present. So they can submit their work there and you know that they will be there throughout in order to apply the learning. Right, so if you help your trainers to succeed, like I've mentioned earlier on, these 3 different points, and also setting up a good example, naturally, even they have their face on or off, it would be better. And I think outcome is, again, the most important. So assignment and assessment, it's the thing that we should place more attention on. So why is this 3 steps so important right now? Why do you think right now we should look at more online learning? And even after COVID, why we might remain online and we might move away from classroom training? So right now, you can utilize the chat. Share your thoughts on why do you think now is the time for us to look beyond traditional classroom training. Can I get you to unmute yourself and elaborate on what you mean?
I would say that I think just now you have touched on a very, very important point. Now, people, by promoting learning culture, at the same time, companies are also very concerned about the cost. So if you move it to virtual, definitely that will encourage, or perhaps that will bring down the cost per head, right? Now, time is also of an asset. Companies are getting very lean. Now, that's the reason why in order to encourage, everyone will have a different time slot or schedule. So this is why I would say that self-paced is very important. Now, let's talk about the current generation. We are learning a lot of things. You just look at during COVID. Everybody is learning cooking. So crazy about cooking where all the ingredients are sold out. Just why? You can see everybody is learning through YouTube or any kind of video, anything that's from the PA, anything. Just imagine that how enjoying that people are learning through this kind of the latest platform. That's why I say this is the way moving forward. Gone are the days, I would say gone are the days that classroom, sometimes you can see that it's also very difficult to engage the participants. Why? I would say one of the major failure is that the T&A is not done properly. Okay, and you realize that in any kind of learning, classroom learning, the very, very, I would say that most of the classroom learning, that what I realize is that there are different types of background. And that's why sometimes is that it's very difficult for the trainers to structure in a way that to have one size fits all, because some of them you'll be definitely left behind. You have touched on a very good point here, because you mentioned that some of them say, I feel dissatisfied. But what do they mean by dissatisfied? Do you have the time to go and uncover that? There are many people don't really find time to deep dive into it. Yeah, so that's what I feel.
Right, thank you so much for sharing. In fact, I just want to bring out a good point, time. Because I also understand, because you're speaking from a HOD perspective, right? HR and L&D, if I were to understand your heart and problem enough, I also understand that, or I suspect that all of you, it's not that you don't want to do all these, measures, and when it talks about T&A, putting things in place, it's not that you don't want to do that, but you also have limited bandwidth, right? So every time when we want to hit an angle and we say, this person can do this and that, but we also want to know the obstacles. So I know time, be it whether it's learner or the organizer or even like head of director, it's about what is in the way in order for you to implement certain effective programs, right? So while I say this, know that for us, because it helps for us to also ensure that learners do apply an outcome. Because to be honest, if they don't apply, I always say that at the end of the class, it will just be a waste of time for myself as well as the learners. And I think no learners would want to go through the entire training program if they can't benefit from it. So at the end of the day, if as HR, HOD, or regardless your division or your profile, if you don't have the time, let us know, because Jana and myself, we usually ask you a lot of questions. In fact, I think some of you, when you first worked with us, just like, hey, how come you're the first training agency that asks us so many questions? What do you mean by this? And what do you mean by that? How come it's so important? What motivates you to do this? And it might seem a little bit daunting at the start, but if we really get those right, we will ensure that the outcomes can be achieved a lot better. And then if you don't want us to get you to ask the learners, Another thing is also to give us permission to speak to learners themselves. And we have this entire process of evaluating the training success even after the workshop. So we can have further conversation after this. And the main thing is about long-term engagement, because we talk about change, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So if we have visibility of how your learners are applying, we can also then propose the right intervention. We're very customer-centric, so we always speak to trainers and customers, and even when people complain to me, like participants, I will listen to them. Hence, we come out with the 30-day learning program, we come out with online courses, blended approach, etc. All of this because of feedback. So just want to let you guys know that we can do the job if you don't have the time for it, all right? So thanks a lot, CS, for voicing that out. Alex, okay, so Alex is here with us now. Alex, would you like to say a few words of what you think worked and can be improved during this whole blended learning or this whole COVID situation?
Wow. First up, I think thanks for the sharing. It's refreshing to hear how much traction that blended learning is getting. And I think back to your question about what we could do during this season, where perhaps it does forces some of us to consider now how else can we find learning and development in different ways. And I particularly like how you call the example where it's about finding that fit for the learner as we somehow take time to understand culturally what works in the organization. So by that, I think you have helped us to appreciate that the more we find out how a certain culture is prevalent in the organization, instead of trying to force change to happen, blended learning sort of leverages on the existing culture. So if the culture is as such that the organization actually forces the employees, quote unquote forces, in a way where learning can only take place when people need to find time after the office hour, then perhaps blended learning is designed in such a way where indeed it's about taking charge of their development anytime, anywhere. And perhaps if only after office hours they can go online, then that means maybe during their commuting time, if they're taking public transport, they can just go up on a simple e-learning course for 10-15 minutes and learning has taken place. So I think blended learning has this opportunity where instead of trying to change an effect in the culture, I think we can explore how it could leverage on existing culture and still make development work. Yeah.
Nice, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a lot of leveraging on existing, right? So thanks a lot. So right now, I mean, we know that there's actually a lot of opportunities, and not all organizations would tackle learning the same way, because there are nuances like security, infrastructure, organization structure, so many different things, right? So all of our programs are customized, and when you look out for training solutions, you should also look to have the customized one if outcome is the main focus. So over here, there are 3 reasons, personally, I think that right now it's very, very important for us to even take soft skills learning online. And it's no longer a matter of, oh, you know, I think face-to-face is better. But because we are communicating more and more virtually, and in this crisis, right, communication skills is so important. And just look at what's happening in the US, and even like elections in Singapore, it's coming, how the government is communicating this aspect in the midst of a crisis, right? If communication it's not done well and it's not effective, there will be severe consequences, and there will be conflicts, there will be uproar. And talking about communication, there's so many things like leadership, negotiation, and sales. So hard skills, everything can be automated by robot actually, and with AI. But the soft part of the human aspect, it would not go away. It's just a change in platform. So it's not about waiting for COVID to be over, but it's about what would stay and what is the behavior shift that would then become the new norm. And the new norm would be virtual communication. In fact, we don't even realize we've been communicating so virtually. And some of your teams might, some of you might have offices in different countries as well. And the teams do have to communicate virtually even before COVID happened. And there are several requests and also questions by some participants, especially public speaking, right? Just like, oh, I usually do conference call. How do I engage virtually? And that was before COVID. And look at how much more essential it is right now. So now it's the time. And also there's more and more pressure for L&D to contribute the learning efforts and direct it to companies' growth. It's no longer just a check in the box mentality. It's no longer just, okay, this competency is good. So we have to really look at the outcome, and from an organizational standpoint, what is the value? Because at the end of the day, if I'm running a training program, or Alex running a training program, or other trainers running a training program that it's not very valuable and we are still in for it, then I think something is really wrong. And the adult learning space in Singapore, it's like the gap is really huge, right? So being outcome driven is extremely important. And there are already competency and skills online learning that we have successfully conducted and brought online. So the highlighted ones are things we have conducted either through a 4-hour Zoom session or bite-sized format split into a few segments, or blended learning. So blended learning would have a pre-recorded session as well as a live coaching session. And there will also be other competencies that you can potentially choose from, like facilitation, negotiation, even content marketing, right? Communication right now on social media. How do you tell stories? And how do you connect better with customers, or even internally to build that culture if the culture is not there in the first place? So I would encourage all of you after today to rethink your training objective, be more specific with your training title as well as your training outcomes, and try to make it contextual. Because when you make it contextual, then the learners would feel that it's beneficial for them. Otherwise, there will always be other fires to fight and other things that seems urgent. So if you make it seem contextual, this becomes extremely relevant. So yeah, how do you tell story in a time of COVID, right, to win more business, etc. So this is just the beginning. And as I promised, you would know how to unlock this PDF summary. So there's a QR code over here, or Jana would type in the URL in the chat. So we are making this interactive. This is also leveraging new technology, right? So we're doing this post survey, but in an interactive fashion. So if you can scan your QR code via your phone or just URL on your laptop, you can watch some of my questions done verbally, and then you can key in your answers. And afterwards, don't go yet. When you're done, please type in the chat that you are done. All right, so you can scan the QR code over here. And right now, I would just like to open up the floor for any potential questions. Someone, yeah, okay, so Jana has already sent in the link. So Samuel, are you here with us? As well as okay, Samuel.
Yeah, hi.
So any questions on your side?
Okay. I always felt that a leadership program it's difficult to conduct online. Yeah, because
why?
I'm attending a leadership program with okay, can I mention the name?
No, you don't have to. Yeah.
Don't have to. Yeah, with established institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of learners felt that I mean, we only attended one face-to-face training. After that, circuit breakers stepped in and they did a survey on whether do we want to continue the program online. But 100% of the participants say no, because leadership programs shouldn't conducted online, because the effectiveness isn't there. It's not like public speaking, communication. You still can. Yeah. So I want maybe hear your comment. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Do you ask them why do they feel that it's not effective to be done online?
Because for leadership program that I'm undergoing, there are many modules. We have a lot of activities. We have a lot of group activities that we need to apply on. So it's very challenging to conduct online. Yeah.
I see. Okay. So I believe it's kind of like team building, where you do need people to gather together, maybe like solve a particular puzzle, and there's logistics involved, physical tactile
like
things,
that,
right? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think just like I talk about offline and online, if you put both of them together, there are the restrictions, right? So I think logistics right now, it's a means to an end, and logistic is the one that gets in the way, because maybe offline they have creative means in order to use tactile sensation to get teams to work together and to lead a team. But right now, because we're moving virtual, even if the outcome is the same, then I think the question is to see whether the training vendor is willing to adapt the activities to fulfill the same outcome virtually. Because leadership, leadership is not exclusive to just offline, because a lot of leaders are virtual, and even after COVID, they are going to be virtual leaders. In fact, I know of this lady who leads a remote team ever since she started, and so she called herself a digital nomad, and she has team members from different parts of the world, also digital nomads, traveling around, and they actually tackle really, really big projects for McDonald's in design and branding projects, UI, UX project, and they made it work, and they have such a good team culture. That is good leadership. And how did she do that? How does she do that virtually? So I think to answer your question, it's number one, to look at logistically, can we change the activity so that it's not, so physical logistics is not required to achieve the same outcome? That's number one. Number two, can we adapt the learning outcomes and make it more contextual to what is needed in the future? And then number three, in terms of the format, is there a better format rather than a cut and paste kind of approach in order to achieve 1 and 2? Right? To make it relevant, contextual, at the same time, to make sure that outcomes are achieved and applied. Because how do we lead virtually? That's actually something very interesting, right? If you can do that, you are a great leader. In fact, a lot of the leaders that you feel inspired by, you don't have first-hand contact with them, but you think they're great leaders, right? So does this say a lot about virtual leadership? It does. Yeah. So I think that would be my answer.
Okay,
That
thanks.
Right. Anyone else? How about, let's see, Jesslyn, are you still here with us? Jesslyn.
Hello. I really like the sharing that on particularly the post learning engagement ideas. I think you mentioned whether we want to do a 1-month survey or a bite-sized email, or the option of doing group coaching. I think that is something, to be honest, I haven't thought about it before. I think in my organization itself, coincidentally, we just had our own leadership development course that we just did it live virtual session. So this is, I think we are still rolling out a couple of more programs ahead in the months ahead. I think the biggest concern that as a HR team that we have is that how do you ensure that sort of like everybody goes inside the training rooms happy, as in they are excited about the takeaways. You have your exec sponsors coming in to speak, to share about why are we doing this, the purpose, why this is important, and all as leaders, you guys should you guys should set good example. But I think the biggest issue we have is that after we land that message, how do we reinforce the things that we have learned in the particular leadership training program? I think that's still an issue for us that we are still like figuring out.
Right. So I think it's a very good question. I think it boils back down to also feeling inspired, right? And setting the right mindset. So just now I talked about having a collective inspiration. In fact, we are also trying something new. It's called a client spotlight. So if you would like us to do this for your upcoming batches, please let us know. How the client spotlight works is such that after every batch, we would survey the participants, and also we'll look out for participants who are natural leaders and have actually actively in the workshop itself applied and seen some form of transformation. And that's already very promising, right? And it's about sustaining transformation after. So we'll spotlight this particular participant. We'll design like maybe a poster for him with a nice face and say, okay, some of the key actionable best practices that he can potentially apply. And then as HR and L&D, you can circulate this fantastic poster all around your organization. Number one, to say that, you know, you guys are actually actively developing your people. Number two, to get people really excited to see, wow, you know, maybe Samuel went through the course, right? It's like, wow, Samuel learned so much and he's such a role model. In fact, participants have more to share than trainers because contextual experiences, right? So they can look up to him to say, hey, Samuel, you know, I have this upcoming leadership conference, or, you know, I have this particular challenge. Since you attended the training, any bite-sized tips? And then if Samuel or, you know, participant can say that, oh yeah, sure, then already learn a little bit, and that is like social learning that I talked about earlier on, yeah? Then not just they learn even without attending the workshop, but they will be so much more inspired to see what HR will present to them next. Does that make sense? So over time, I think it would create this collective inspiration. So this is a fascinating idea that we would like to explore. So if you're interested, you can let Jana know about it, so we can implement it after. So design everything free of charge, don't worry. We are more outcome focused. All right, so does that answer your question, Jaslyn?
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I think a lot of creative approaches in order to achieve the outcome. So right now, I would like you to just take a while, scan the QR code, and you do need a little bit of video, ideally. You can try this out for your own participants as well to make it more human, especially now we're virtual, right? So scan the QR code, take a while, and at the very end, once you've completed the virtual survey, you would be directed to a link to download the file. And of course, if you can recommend this workshop, if you have benefited from this, which I think you have or have, please recommend. I mean, since it's free and we don't do any selling, you can take all these best practices for your own trainers, for your own learning, and yeah, let us know how we can help. Cool, so thank you very, very much. And if you have any more questions, we would stay here and we'll address those questions. Otherwise, you can schedule a call with us and we'll be very, very happy to help you out. All right, so have a very good evening.